Sometimes people come to me not only for advice, but also for the right to speak their mind. Recently, a man came into the parish. He looked as if his world had collapsed before his eyes. Sitting down opposite me, he was silent for a long time, and then he spoke. His words were full of bitterness that had accumulated in his heart over many years. Today, I want to share his story with you. It is a story that reminds us how fragile human relationships can be. Here are his words. My name is Clarence Winston Hardwell, and I am 68 years old. I have spent my entire life in the small town of Middletown, Tennessee, raising cattle and growing feed crops on my own ranch. I have been married to Vivian for 45 years, and we have an adult son, Colin, who is 42 years old, married to Priscilla and works as a manager at a local bank. Our grandson Bentley just turned 19 and is in college. My wife and I live in an old house on the ranch, and our children have their own homes in town. Over the years, I have accumulated a decent fortune and earned the respect of my neighbors, although I have never sought fame or recognition. My ranch covers 800 acres of rolling hills, where about 200 head of Angus cattle graze. On the morning of September 10th, I got up at 5:30 as usual. The habit of getting up early had formed over decades of farm life when the day begins with the first rays of the sun. Vivian was still asleep, snoring quietly under the blanket, her gray hair scattered across the pillow. I quietly got dressed in worn jeans and a plaid shirt, trying not to wake my wife, and went to the kitchen, where a thermos of strong coffee that Vivian had prepared the night before was waiting for me. She always took care of the little things that made life more comfortable. Half an hour later, my assistant Oswald Crispin drove up to the house in his old pickup truck. He is 45 years old and has been working for me for 8 years. He is a reliable and sensible man who knows a lot about animal husbandry. He used to work on a ranch in a neighboring county, but his boss went bankrupt after unsuccessful investments in land speculation, and Oswald came to work for me. A tall, wiry man with a tanned face and calm gray eyes, he rarely said anything unnecessary, but always did his job conscientiously. "Good morning, Mr. Hardwell," he greeted me, dismounting from a bay gelding named Baxter. "The horses are ready. We can go." The weather looks good. I finished my coffee, put on the worn leather cowboy hat I had been wearing for 15 years, and went out to the hitching post. My red stallion, Chester, was shifting impatiently from foot to foot, sensing the upcoming ride. I had bought this horse as a foal 5 years ago from a breeder in Kentucky, and over that time we had become true partners. Chester knew every trail on the ranch, sensed my mood, and never let me down in difficult situations. As I settled into the saddle, I felt the familiar sense of freedom I experienced every time I rode out to survey my property. The leather saddle, custom made by a local craftsman, was the perfect size and had long since molded to the shape of my body. The morning air was fresh and cool, dew glistened on the grass like scattered diamonds, and the distant Tennessee mountains were barely visible in the light haze. We headed for the distant pastures where the main herd grazed. The road led through a small oak grove, then past a pond that I had dug 10 years ago for the cattle to drink from. The pond turned out well. In the spring it was filled with meltwater, and in the summer it was fed by a small stream. Mallards made their nests there and raised their young every year. Along the way, Oswald talked about current affairs, occasionally pointing to various parts of the ranch. "Yesterday the vet examined the calves in the northern pen," he said, holding the reins with one hand. "They are all healthy, and their vaccinations are on schedule. Dr. McKinley is pleased with the condition of the young stock and says that this year they are gaining weight faster than usual. However, the fence there needs to be repaired. 2 posts were loosened after last week's storm." "We'll take care of it next week," I replied, admiring the view. "Do we have the materials?" "The posts were delivered on Monday and the wire is fine too. I think we can do it in a day if the weather holds." "How's the hay harvest going?" "Time is running out and the rains will start soon." "We're almost done," Oswald reported. "If the weather holds for another week, we'll be done by the end of the month. The hay quality is excellent this year, the moisture content is normal, and the color is right. We'll have enough for the winter, maybe even enough to sell the surplus to Johnson. He asked about it on the phone yesterday. Farmer Johnson owned the neighboring ranch, but he was less successful at farming. Every year he ran out of feed for the winter and bought the surplus from his more successful neighbors. I had no objection to such deals. Good relations with neighbors are more important than a few dollars of profit. We drove to the hill that overlooked the entire ranch. It was my favorite place. From here, I could see the results of 40 years of labor. Below, on the green meadows, 200 head of Angus cattle grazed peacefully. The black carcasses of the animals were scattered picturesquely across the pasture. Some cows lying in the shade of spreading oak trees chewing their cud. The animals looked well-fed and healthy, their shiny sides testifying to good care and quality feed. "A nice picture," said Oswald, following my gaze. "This year's profits should be good. Beef prices are stable, and demand is not falling if they don't collapse before autumn," I remarked cautiously. 40 years in business have taught me not to make overly optimistic plans. I had seen too many farmers go bankrupt due to unexpected market fluctuations or natural disasters. We went down to the herd and examined the animals closely. Most of the cows were in excellent condition. The calves were growing fast and looked strong. Oswald made notes in a worn leather notebook, marking the animals that would need to be shown to the vet on his next visit. One cow was limping on her left front leg, but the limp was minor. She had probably stepped on a sharp rock. "This one needs to be examined more closely," I said, pointing to the limping cow. "I've already noticed," Oswald nodded. "Tomorrow we'll put her in the pen and check her hoof. If it's just a stone stuck there, we'll pull it out and treat the wound." We rode around the entire pasture, checking the condition of the watering holes and mineral supplement feeders. Everything was in order. The water was clean, and the salt wasn't damp. In the far corner of the pasture, I noticed several calves playing with each other, butting heads and running in circles. This was a good sign. Healthy animals are always active and curious. By 9:30 in the morning, we had finished our tour of the eastern section and headed for the western pastures, where the breeding bulls and young stock were kept. This area required special attention. Breeding animals were expensive, and any health problems could result in serious losses. 3 breeding bulls grazed separately from the main herd. Each was a purebred Angus with a pedigree, worth about $10,000 per head. The main bull, nicknamed Emperor, was a real beauty. Massive, muscular, with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. He came from a famous Texas breeding farm and had already produced excellent offspring. "Emperor has gained weight," Oswald noted. "Apparently the new feed suits him." "Good. How's Baron? He seemed sluggish yesterday." We drove closer to the second bull. Baron did indeed look less active than usual, but his appetite was normal. The animal was calmly grazing. "Maybe it's just the heat," Oswald suggested, "but it's better to call the vet tomorrow to have him examined." I agreed. In my line of work, you can't risk the health of breeding animals. It's better to spend a little extra on a vet than to lose an expensive bull. By 10 in the morning, we had finished our tour of all the pastures and returned home. The sun was already high in the sky and it was getting hot. The horses were covered in light sweat, and I decided it was time to go back. Chester was walking briskly, but I could tell he was tired. After all, we had been in the saddle for more than 3 hours. Vivian was already awake and making breakfast. Seeing us through the kitchen window, she waved from the porch. She was wearing a light, colorful dress that I had given her for her last birthday, her gray hair neatly styled. "How are things on the farm?" she asked when we entered the house and took off our shoes in the hallway. "Everything's fine," I replied, hanging my hat on a wooden hook next to the door. "The cattle are healthy. There's enough feed." Oswald joined us for breakfast. My assistant thanked her and sat down at the large oak table that had been in our kitchen for 20 years. Vivian served us eggs and bacon, fresh rolls she had baked that morning, homemade butter, and strong coffee. The smell of fresh baking filled the kitchen, creating an atmosphere of comfort and abundance. During the meal, we discussed our plans for the day. Oswald was going to repair an old tractor with a faulty engine and then check the condition of the equipment in the barn. I planned to sort through the papers that had accumulated in my office. I needed to prepare documents for the fall livestock sale and check the bills from feed and fertilizer suppliers. "By the way, Mr. Hardwell," Oswald said, finishing his coffee, "a representative from the meat processing plant in Nashville called yesterday. They're offering a good price for young cattle, but they want to sign a 3-year contract." "What price?" I asked. 15% above market price, but with the condition of delivery strictly according to schedule and of a certain quality. It was an interesting offer. Long-term contracts provided stability, but limited freedom of maneuver. If market prices rise sharply, I will be bound by my obligations. Let's think about it, I decided. There's no need to rush with an answer. Around noon, Dr. Fitzpatrick's familiar white car pulled up to the house. Leland Fitzpatrick had been our family doctor for 20 years, a knowledgeable and experienced man who was respected throughout the neighborhood. He was 55 years old, tall, slightly overweight, with intelligent eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. Every 6 months he came for a routine checkup, which was especially important at my age. "Welcome, Doc." I greeted him as I stepped out onto the porch. "How are things in town?" "Hi, Clarence. Things are going well, I can't complain. True, there are more and more patients with diabetes. Modern life is taking its toll." "How are you feeling?" "I can't complain. Only sometimes my lower back aches after a long ride, and my knees hurt in the morning. Age is taking its toll." The doctor opened his worn leather bag, which he had been carrying around for many years, and took out his stethoscope. "Well, let's see what's going on inside you. Let's go inside. We need to examine you properly." The examination took place in the bedroom, on the bed that Vivian and I had bought in our first year of marriage. Fitzpatrick listened carefully to my heart and lungs, made me breathe deeply, hold my breath, and cough. Then he checked my blood pressure with an old mechanical sphygmomanometer, felt my stomach, and checked my reflexes with a rubber hammer. Vivian paced nervously in the hallway, even though these procedures had been repeated regularly for many years. "Your heart is ticking like a Swiss watch," said the doctor, putting his stethoscope away in his bag. "The rhythm is steady, no murmurs. Your blood pressure is 130/80, which is excellent for your age. Your lungs are clear, no wheezing or dark spots. Your liver is normal, as are your kidneys. The only thing that worries me a little is that you've gained 3 kilograms since last time." "Vivian feeds me well," I explained, buttoning my shirt, "and I'm not moving as much as I used to." "That's understandable, and I'm not against good nutrition. But you need to move more. Horseback riding is great, but add some walking. At least half an hour every day. And less fried food, more vegetables and fish." The doctor took out his prescription pad and wrote a prescription for B vitamins and a joint supplement. "Take these vitamins for 2 months, he explained, handing me the prescription. "They will support your nervous system and improve your metabolism. And this is for your joints. When your knees or lower back hurt, take 1 tablet in the morning after eating." We went into the kitchen where Vivian had made tea and homemade apple pie. The doctor was in no hurry to leave. He had a tradition of drinking a cup of tea after his examination and talking about local news. "How are the children?" he asked, cutting a piece of pie. "Is Colin still working at the bank?" "Yes, he is," I replied. "True, he hasn't been visiting much lately. He says he's busy." "Young people are like that these days," the doctor remarked philosophically. "They're always rushing somewhere. They don't have enough time for their families." "How's your grandson?" "Bentley dropped out of college," Vivian interjected. "He says he wants to find a job, but so far he's just sitting at home." The doctor shook his head. "That's a shame. Education is more important now than ever. Although maybe the boy just hasn't decided on a future profession yet. It happens." We chatted for another half hour about the weather, the harvest, and local news. The doctor said that the mayor was planning to repair the main road and that the school was finally going to replace the old windows. Such conversations were a pleasant part of rural life. Everyone knew each other and took an interest in their neighbors' affairs. "Well," said the doctor, getting ready to leave, "see you in 6 months. And if anything hurts, call me right away. And don't forget to take walks." After he left, I felt relieved. At my age, every visit to the doctor caused hidden anxiety, although I tried not to show it to my wife or myself. It's good that my health hasn't let me down yet. I still have many plans that I want to carry out. In the afternoon, I sat down in my office to sort through the accumulated documents. The office was located in a small room on the first floor, with windows overlooking the garden. On the walls hung photographs of prize winners from livestock shows, diplomas, and old maps of the district. The massive oak table was covered with papers, bills, contracts, letters from buyers. He had to prepare documents for the sale of some of the young stock in October, check invoices from feed and veterinary drug suppliers, and review new offers from meat processing plants. Business was going well, but it required constant attention to detail. One mistake in the calculations could cost thousands of dollars. I studied the offer from the Nashville meat processing plant that Oswald had mentioned that morning with particular attention. The terms were really attractive, but the 3-year contract tied my hands. On the other hand, stable supplies guaranteed a steady income, which was important at my age. By evening, my eyes were tired from looking at small numbers in printed text. I put the documents aside and went out onto the porch to get some fresh air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, cows mooed as Oswald herded them into their pens for the night. Dinner took place in the usual family atmosphere. Vivian cooked fried fish with potatoes and vegetables from her own garden. We ate slowly, discussing the events of the day. I told her about the results of my medical examination, and Vivian shared news from a neighbor who had called during the day. After dinner, as we sat at the table finishing our tea, Vivian brought up the subject of the children. It had been a sore subject lately, and I could see that my wife was seriously concerned. "Clarence, I'm very worried about Colin," she said, folding her napkin neatly. "When was the last time you had a normal conversation with him?" I thought about it, going over the last few weeks in my mind. Indeed, our son hadn't been to see us in 3 weeks, although he used to come by every weekend, or at least call regularly. "He called the night before last," I replied. "We talked for about 5 minutes. He said he was busy at the bank, preparing some important report for the head office." "He's avoiding us, I can feel it," Vivian insisted, her voice tinged with maternal anxiety. And his voice sounded tense, unnatural. As if he was hiding something or afraid to say something. Vivian had a keen, feminine intuition and was rarely wrong about such things. In 45 years of marriage, I had learned to listen to her opinion, especially when it came to family matters. "What does Priscilla say? Is she acting strange too?" "That's the thing," Vivian exclaimed. "She called the day before yesterday, and we only talked for 5 minutes. She was reserved, formal, and kept referring to work and urgent matters. But before, we could talk on the phone for half an hour, discussing recipes, fashion, and plans for the weekend." I put down my cup and looked closely at my wife. Her face showed such concern that she could no longer hide it. "And Bentley is acting very strangely too," she continued in a lowered voice. "A month ago, he suddenly dropped out of college without really explaining why. Colleen says he's just tired of studying and wants to work for a year to gain some life experience. But I think there's something else going on." This news hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was just now finding out that my grandson had dropped out of school, and it came as a complete surprise. "Why didn't you tell me anything before?" "A whole month has passed. Colin specifically asked me not to worry you unnecessarily," Vivian explained. "He said he would deal with his son himself and persuade him to return to his studies. He promised that everything would be settled by the beginning of the next semester. But a month has passed, and there has been no progress." I got up from the table and began pacing around the kitchen, thinking about what I had heard. Bentley had always been a capable and responsible guy, did well in school, participated in sports competitions, and had no trouble getting into college to study economics. His sudden decision to drop out seemed completely illogical and disturbing. "I need to have a serious talk with them," I decided firmly. "Tomorrow I'll call Colin and invite the whole family over for the weekend. It's time to find out what's going on." "Just don't put too much pressure on them," Vivian asked, taking my hand. "Maybe they're just going through a rough patch like all families do. Remember, we had difficult times too." We finished dinner in heavy silence. Vivian quietly cleared the table, and I went out onto the porch and settled into an old wicker rocking chair that I had bought 20 years ago. The evening was unusually quiet and peaceful, with cows mooing in the distance, cicadas chirping in the grass, and a light breeze rustling the leaves of century-old oak trees. Usually these familiar sounds calmed me and put me in a philosophical mood, but today my thoughts were completely occupied with family problems. In over 40 years of fatherhood, Colin and I had, of course, had our disagreements and misunderstandings, but nothing really serious. He grew up to be an obedient and diligent boy, did well in school, and helped out on the farm, although he was never particularly attracted to the ranch. After graduating from high school, he enrolled in the business administration department at university and graduated with good grades. However, he had no interest in cattle breeding and agriculture. He preferred city life, office work, and business suits. I did not insist that he continue the family business. understanding that everyone should be free to choose their own path in life. The next morning, I woke up with the firm intention of finding out what was going on in the family. After breakfast, I called Colin at work, but his secretary said he was on a business trip and would not be back until lunchtime. I had to wait until evening. Around 6 o'clock, I finally got through to my son at home. His voice did sound tense, just as Vivian had warned. "Hi, Dad," he said rather curtly. "What's up?" "Nothing special. Just haven't seen you in a while. Maybe you could come over for dinner tomorrow?" Mom misses her grandson. There was a pause that seemed suspiciously long to me. "Tomorrow is Saturday. We had plans." "Okay, fine. We'll come around 7 if you don't mind." "Of course I don't mind. Mom will make something delicious." After the conversation, I was left with a strange feeling. Colin had always been happy to accept invitations, asking about our lives and joking around. Today he spoke like someone fulfilling an unpleasant duty. Saturday was sunny and warm. Vivian had been busy in the kitchen since morning, preparing her son and grandson's favorite dishes. She baked chicken with potatoes, made apple pie, and cooked vegetable soup. I could see that she was just as nervous as I was, even though she was trying not to show it. "Maybe I'm worrying for nothing," she said, stirring the soup. "Maybe they're just going through a difficult period at work." "We'll see," I replied, but my intuition told me that it wasn't a work problem. Colin arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, as promised. He was with Priscilla and Bentley. I went out to meet them on the porch and immediately noticed the changes. My son looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. Priscilla seemed tense, smiling stiffly, and Bentley looked strange. He was dressed casually, his hair was uncombed, and he had a provocative expression on his face. "Hi, Dad," Colin said, shaking my hand. His handshake was limp, lacking its usual firmness. "Welcome," I replied, hugging my daughter-in-law. "Priscilla, you've lost weight." "Too much work," she replied curtly, avoiding my gaze. Bentley greeted me with a nod, not even coming over to hug me as he used to. This was very unlike him. My grandson had always been an affectionate and open child. We went into the house where Vivian had set the table in the dining room. She kissed everyone as usual, but I saw in her eyes the same anxiety that I felt myself. Dinner took place in a strange atmosphere. Usually our family gatherings were noisy and cheerful. We talked a lot, laughed, discussed the news. Today, however, the conversation was stilted. Colin answered questions about work in monosyllables. Priscilla sat silently, poking at her food with her fork, and Bentley hardly participated in the conversation at all. "How are things at the bank?" I asked my son as I cut up the chicken. "Fine. Lots of reports, checks from headquarters. How about you, Priscilla? How's the insurance company?" "Plenty of work there too," she replied without looking up from her plate. Vivian tried to get her grandson to talk. "Bentley, tell us what you plan to do next. Maybe you'll find a temporary job and then go back to school?" The boy looked up at his grandmother with some irritation. "I don't know yet. Maybe school isn't for me." "But you were a good student," Vivian said in surprise. "Your teachers praised you." "You don't understand much about modern life," Bentley muttered, and there was a note of rudeness in his voice that I had never heard from him before. Colin quickly intervened. "Bentley is just tired of theory. He wants to get some practical experience." I sensed that something was wrong. The family was clearly hiding something, and the atmosphere was becoming increasingly tense. After the main course, Vivian served pie and coffee. We moved to the living room and settled into our armchairs. This was usually the most pleasant time of the evening, when we would chat leisurely about various things. But here, too, there was a sense of insincerity. Finally, Colin cleared his throat and said, "Dad, we need to talk to you." "About business. I'm listening," I replied, setting down my cup. My son looked at his wife and son as if seeking support, then said, "We have an interesting opportunity, a business project that could bring in a good profit." "What kind of project?" I asked, alert. Colin hesitated for a moment, then continued, "You know that abandoned McDonald's warehouse outside of town? The one near the railroad tracks?" I nodded. The old warehouse had been empty for about 5 years, ever since its owner went bankrupt. "We can rent it for a pittance," my son continued, "and organize an entertainment club there. For men." "What kind of entertainment club?" I asked, although I was already beginning to guess. Bentley suddenly perked up and joined the conversation. A poker club, Grandpa. We'll hold tournaments and take a commission from the bank. It's very profitable. I felt a chill inside. So that's what this was about. Poker? I asked. You mean gambling? Not exactly gambling, Colin said quickly. More like a sport. Poker is a mental game where calculation and psychology are important. But the bets will be real, I pressed. There was a pause. Priscilla nervously fiddled with her napkin, and Colin stared at the floor. Of course, Bentley finally admitted. It's no fun without bets. We'll take a percentage of each game. I got up from my chair and started pacing around the room. The picture was becoming clearer, and I didn't like it at all. And how much money do you need for this project? I asked coldly. $50,000, Colin replied quietly. For rent, repairs, equipment, advertising. $50,000 for an underground gambling house, I said sharply. That's exactly what it is. Dad, you don't understand, Colin began, but I interrupted him. I understand perfectly well. You want to get into an illegal business, and you're asking me to finance it. Bentley jumped up from his seat. It's not illegal. Private poker clubs operate everywhere. They're legal in some states, I agreed. But not in Tennessee. Here, such activities are punishable by law. Who cares? My grandson snapped. Half of the businesses in this country operate in gray areas. I looked at him in surprise. The boy standing in front of me was not the same boy I had known since childhood. Somewhere along the way, his politeness, respect for his elders, and basic decency had disappeared. I care, I said firmly, and you should care too. Colin tried to take control of the situation. Dad, we've thought it through. The club will operate quietly without advertising, only for regular customers by referral. There won't be any problems with the law, not yet, I corrected him. But what if the police show up with a search warrant? They won't, Bentley said confidently. We have connections. What connections? I asked in surprise. My grandson wanted to say something, but Colin quickly stopped him with a gesture. It doesn't matter. The main thing is that the risks are minimal and the profits could be very large. I stopped in front of my son and looked him in the eyes. Colin, you're a grown man. You have a family, a responsible job. How can you even think about such things? A responsible job pays peanuts, he replied bitterly. Do you know how much I earn at the bank? It's barely enough to live on, and prices are rising every year. If you don't have enough money, you can find another job, I objected, or ask for a raise. Where? There are 2 banks and a couple of insurance companies in our town. The salaries are the same everywhere, and the raises are peanuts. Priscilla spoke for the first time that evening. Clarence, you don't understand how hard it is for young people these days. Mortgages, loans, Bentley's expenses. We're barely making ends meet. Then you need to review your expenses, I said, not get involved in shady deals. That's easy to say when you have a ranch and capital, Bentley snapped, but we have to count every penny for the rest of our lives? His insolence struck me. I turned to my grandson. I didn't inherit this capital and ranch. I worked hard for 40 years, saved on everything, and invested every dollar in the business. And I never broke the law for quick profits. Times have changed, Grandpa, Bentley said contemptuously. Your methods don't work anymore. Vivian, who had been silent until then, couldn't take it anymore. Bentley, how dare you talk to your grandfather like that? What did I say? The boy snapped. The truth? I felt anger boiling up inside me. No one had ever dared to use that tone in my house before. Enough, I said sharply. This conversation is over. I won't give you any money, and I advise you to forget about this idea. But Dad, Colin began. No buts, I interrupted. I will not finance illegal activities, and I'm surprised you even thought of such a thing. Bentley jumped up and paced around the room. It's always like this. The older generation doesn't understand anything about modern life, but they teach us how to live. We understand the difference between honest earnings and fraud, I replied coldly. Fraud? His grandson flared up. We want to create jobs and entertainment for people. You want to profit from human weaknesses, I said, and don't cover it up with pretty words. Colin tried again. Dad, we're not asking for money as a gift. It's a loan. We'll pay it back with interest. From the proceeds of illegal activities, I asked. No, thank you. Then we'll find the money somewhere else, Bentley declared. Where? I asked. There was another pause. Colin and Priscilla exchanged glances. That's our business, my son finally said. I realized they already had some kind of plan, and that worried me even more. Colin, listen to me as your father, I said, sitting down across from him. You're risking more than just money. Your reputation, your job at the bank, your family's future, all of that could collapse in a single day. Or on the contrary, we'll finally get out of poverty, he replied stubbornly. What poverty? I asked in surprise. You have a house, cars, jobs. The house is mortgaged, the cars are on credit, Priscilla said gloomily. We live from paycheck to paycheck. Like most people, I objected. That's no reason to break the law. Bentley intervened again. What if we don't agree to live like most people? What if we want more? Then you need to work harder, study, develop yourself, I replied, not look for easy ways out. Easy ways out? Snorted my grandson. Do you have any idea how much effort it takes to set up a business like this? I do, and I know how it can end. Colin got up from his chair. So the final decision is no? Final, I confirmed. He nodded to his wife and son. Then it's time for us to go. Colin, don't leave in a quarrel, Vivian asked. Talk calmly. What is there to talk about? Said Bentley. It's clear. Grandpa is living in the last century. That phrase was the last straw. If living according to my conscience and the law means living in the last century, then I prefer the last century. They began to get ready to leave. Priscilla thanked us for dinner, but she said it formally, without warmth. Colin shook my hand, but his eyes showed disappointment and resentment. Bentley didn't even say goodbye. After seeing them to their car, I returned to the house. Vivian was sitting in the living room crying. What's going on with them? She asked through her tears. They're not our family anymore, especially Bentley. I don't recognize him anymore. I hugged my wife. I don't know. But something has changed them a lot. We cleared the table in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The festive dinner had turned into a family drama, and it was unclear how to fix it. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, a car pulled up to the house. I looked out the window and saw that it was Thatcher Mayfield, my old friend. He is 70 years old, once served as county sheriff, and is now retired. He is a wise and experienced man who can always be consulted. Good evening, he greeted us as he climbed the porch steps. I saw you had guests. Am I interrupting? Not at all. I needed to talk. We sat down on the porch. Thatcher lit his pipe, something he only did during serious conversations. Judging by the look on your face, the meeting didn't go very well, he remarked. I told him about my conversation with my family without hiding any details. Thatcher listened silently, nodding occasionally. So, the poker club, he said when I finished. I was wondering where the wind was blowing from. You mean you know something? I asked in surprise. I've heard a few things. Last week I was in the neighboring county talking to some old colleagues. They recently busted an underground casino there. About 20 people were arrested, including the organizers. What happened to them? The organizers got 2 years probation plus hefty fines. The rest were let go with warnings. But their reputations are ruined forever. Thatcher took a long drag on his pipe and continued. And the month before last, there was a big raid in Memphis. That case was more serious. Not just poker, but a real casino with roulette and slot machines. The owner was sentenced to 5 years and his assistants were ruined by fines and legal costs. Collins said they have connections, I said. Connections are connections, but the law's the law, Thatcher remarked philosophically. Besides, there's a lot of money involved in gambling. And where there's a lot of money, sooner or later, there are big problems. He paused, looking at the stars, then added, You did the right thing by refusing. An elderly person shouldn't get involved in such things. In fact, no one should. But they'll find the money somewhere else, I said anxiously. Perhaps. Then they'll have to learn from their mistakes. We sat on the porch until midnight discussing the situation. Thatcher told a few more stories about how similar ventures had ended. None of the stories had a happy ending. The saddest thing is that young people often get involved in such things, thinking they've found a way to get rich quick, he said as he left. And in the end, they ruin their lives. After he left, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Thoughts about my family were spinning in my head, about what could have changed my loved ones so much. I was especially worried about Bentley. His behavior was completely out of character. It was as if someone had replaced the well-mannered boy with a rude and greedy teenager. Vivian was breathing quietly next to me, but I knew she was awake too. She sighed and tossed and turned from time to time. That evening was a turning point in our family relationships, and it was completely unclear what would happen next. A week had passed since the unpleasant conversation with the family. Vivian and I hardly discussed what had happened, but I could see that my wife was just as upset as I was. She became distracted, often lost in thought while doing everyday chores, and in the evenings she would sit by the window for a long time, looking out at the road. It was as if she was waiting for Colin and his family to arrive and for everything to work itself out. I also felt uneasy. The farm work continued as usual, but my thoughts kept returning to our family problems. I was particularly concerned that Colin and Bentley spoke so confidently about the possibility of finding money elsewhere. Where did they get such confidence? And what were they willing to risk for their dubious venture? On Tuesday morning, I rode around the pastures with Oswald as usual. We checked on the cattle, inspected the fences, and planned the work for the coming days. Oswald noticed my pensiveness and tried several times to strike up a conversation about ranch business, but I responded distractedly. "Mr. Hardwell, you don't look well," he finally said bluntly. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "No, I'm fine," I replied. "Just family stuff." Oswald tactfully didn't ask for details, but I could see the concern in his eyes. After 8 years of working together, he had become like family to me. Around noon, Thatcher's familiar pickup truck pulled up to the house. My old friend got out of the car with a serious expression on his face. "Hello, Clarence," he greeted me. "We need to talk." "Of course. Shall we go inside or sit on the porch?" "The porch would be better. This is going to be a difficult conversation." We settled into the wicker chairs. Thatcher was silent for a while, lighting his usual pipe. I waited patiently, knowing that my friend would not waste time on trivialities. "I was in town yesterday on business," he finally began. "I stopped by the bank where your son Colin works, and I saw something interesting." "What exactly?" I asked, alert. "Your son was coming out of the manager's office with a large envelope, a very large one, and the expression on his face was, how can I put it, solemn and tense at the same time." Thatcher took a drag on his pipe and continued. "I got curious. I waited until he left, then went to see Jim Collins. You know, the bank manager. We've known each other since school. We talked about this and that, and he mentioned in passing that your son had just taken out a large loan. I felt something tighten in my chest. How big?" $50,000, Thatcher said quietly, secured against his wife's house. I got up from my chair and paced the porch. So they had decided to go ahead with their plan after all. And they hadn't just decided, they had already started taking action. Did Jim say anything about the terms of the loan? "The interest rate is high, and the term is short, 2 years. If they don't pay it back on time, Priscilla's house will go up for auction." It was even worse than I thought. They were risking not only their reputation and freedom, but also the roof over their heads. "And that's not all," Thatcher continued grimly. "Rumors are already spreading around town that your family's going to open some kind of entertainment venue. People are saying different things. Some think it will be a restaurant or bar. Others suspect something more dubious." Where did the rumors come from? Bentley apparently can't keep his mouth shut. He brags to his friends that he's going to get rich soon. And in a small town, news travels fast. I sat back in my chair and thought. The situation was getting more and more serious. Colin had mortgaged his wife's house, taken out a high-interest loan, and Bentley was already spreading the word around town. If their plan failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. "What would you do in my place?" I asked my friend. Thatcher was silent for a long time, thinking about his answer. "That's a difficult question. On the one hand, they are adults and have the right to make their own mistakes. On the other hand, you are their father and grandfather. You can't just stand by and watch them ruin their lives." "But what can I do? They don't listen to me. Try talking to them again. Maybe when they find out you know about the loan, it will make them see sense." At that moment, Vivian came out onto the porch with a tray of cups and a jug of lemonade. "Good afternoon, Thatcher," she said. "How's the family?" "Fine, thanks. Martha sends her regards." Vivian poured the lemonade and was about to leave, but I stopped her. "Stay. Thatcher has some important news about Colin." My wife became alarmed. What happened? I briefly repeated my friend's words to her. Vivian paled and sank into an empty chair. My God, she whispered. So they really decided to do this crazy thing. It looks that way, Thatcher nodded. And they're running out of time. They have to service the loan, and the interest is racking up every day. Vivian paused, then said, Clarence, we need to talk to them. But not like last time. That turned into a scandal. How else? I asked irritably. They don't want to listen to reason. We need to try a different approach, my wife insisted. A softer one. Show them that we love them and care about them, not just condemn them. Thatcher nodded. Vivian is right. In a conflict situation, people usually shut down and stop accepting criticism. But sincere concern can sometimes melt the ice. When do you suggest we have this conversation? I asked my wife. Your birthday is coming up, she reminded me. Invite them over for a family dinner, in a relaxed home environment without outsiders. Maybe we'll be able to find common ground. The idea seemed dubious to me. After the last meeting ended in almost a quarrel, it was naive to hope for family idol. But there were no other options. Okay, I agreed. Let's try. Thatcher finished his lemonade and got ready to leave. Keep me posted. And remember, whatever happens, you're doing the right thing. You can't indulge your loved ones when they're on the wrong path. After he left, Vivian and I sat on the porch for a long time, discussing the upcoming conversation with the family. My wife was optimistic, believing that parental love and wisdom could change the minds of our wayward children. I was more skeptical but decided to give the plan a chance. That evening, I called Colin at home. Priscilla answered the phone. Hi, Priscilla, I said as friendly as I could. How are you? Good evening, Clarence, she replied reservedly. Fine, thanks. Is Colin home? Yes, I'll get him. A minute later, my son came to the phone. His voice was tense, just like a week ago. Hi, Dad. Is something wrong? Nothing special. I just wanted to invite you to my birthday. I'll be 69 on September 21st. There was a pause. I could almost physically feel Colin thinking about whether to accept the invitation. We had plans, he began, but I interrupted him. Colin, it's my birthday. I would really like to spend it with my family. Another pause, then a sigh. Okay, Dad. We'll be there. What time? Around 6 in the evening. Mom will make a festive dinner. It's a deal. See you then. The conversation was short and formal, but the main thing was that they agreed to come. Now I just had to hope I could find the right words. The next few days were spent preparing for the celebration. Vivian planned the menu, cleaned the house, and bought groceries. I went about my usual chores, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation. What would I say? How could I convince grown adults to give up a plan in which they had already invested all their savings and even mortgaged their house? On Saturday, the day before my birthday, I decided to take a horseback ride to the far corners of the ranch. Such trips always help me think and make important decisions. I saddled Chester and headed for the northern pastures, where I had rarely been lately. The weather was beautiful, sunny, warm, with a light breeze. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to turn yellow, and the grass was still green. Chester trotted along, enjoying the ride. We climbed a high hill that offered a view of the entire county. Below lay my property, pastures where cows grazed peacefully, fields with harvested hay, forest strips, ponds. All this was the result of 40 years of work. I bought my first 100 acres of land at the age of 28, taking out a loan from the same bank where Colin now works. Then I gradually expanded the farm, bought livestock, and built buildings. It was difficult, especially in the early years. I worked from dawn to dusk, saved on everything, and reinvested every dollar of profit back into the business. Vivian supported me, even though she also had a hard time. We lived modestly, rarely allowed ourselves some entertainment, and put off buying new furniture and clothes. But I never looked for easy ways out or broke the law for quick profits. Honesty and hard work are what helped me succeed. And now my own son is willing to jeopardize all of that for a dubious venture. Chester rode down the hill and headed for the old oak tree, where I liked to rest on hot days. The tree was huge, probably over 100 years old. Its broad crown provided thick shade, and its thick trunk served as a comfortable backrest. I dismounted and sat down under the oak, letting my horse graze on the grass. I needed to think about tomorrow's conversation. Thatcher and Vivian advised a gentle approach. But would it work? When I see people close to me doing something foolish, it's hard to control my emotions. On the other hand, a harsh approach had already failed. Perhaps it was worth trying a different tactic. Not criticizing their plan, but trying to understand their motives. To find out what exactly made them take such a risk. Maybe their financial problems were more serious than I thought. But even if that was the case, did it justify breaking the law? Bentley's behavior was particularly disturbing. He used to be a polite and respectful boy, but now he had become arrogant and greedy. What could have caused such a change? Chester came up to me and whinnied softly, as if sensing my mood. I stroked his neck. Horses have always been better at calming people than humans. "What should I do, old friend?" I asked the horse. "What about my family?" Chester snorted and shook his head, as if he didn't know the answer to that question either. We spent more than an hour under the oak tree. I thought about the past and the future, about whether I had raised my son right, whether I had missed something important. Colin grew up in comfort, attended a good school, and went to university. He didn't have the difficulties I faced in my youth. Maybe that was the problem? Did his easy life teach him not to appreciate honestly earned money? And Bentley grew up in complete comfort. His grandparents spoiled him, and his parents never denied him anything reasonable. Where did this greed and contempt for his elders come from? By evening, I returned home without a definitive plan of action, but with the firm intention of trying to save my family from disaster. Tomorrow there would be an important conversation that could determine the fate of all of us. Vivian met me on the porch. "So have you figured out what you're going to say?" "I'll play it by ear," I replied. "The main thing is to stay calm and find out what's driving them." "I'll make all their favorite dishes," my wife said. "Good food is conducive to peaceful conversation." I hugged Vivian and kissed her on the forehead. In 45 years of marriage, she had never reproached me for making the wrong decisions, always supporting and helping me. Now her support was especially important. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that we are doing the right thing," I said. "Of course we are," she agreed. "Now go wash up, dinner's ready." We spent the evening quietly, each thinking about the day ahead. I looked through old photos. Colin as a child, his wedding, Bentley's birth, family holidays. In all the pictures, people were smiling, hugging, looking happy. When did everything change? And can we get back what we had before? Before going to bed, I went out onto the porch to get some fresh air. The night was starry and quiet. At times like this, I usually felt peace of mind, but today I couldn't shake my anxiety. Tomorrow would be my 69th birthday, and it should have been a joyful day. But instead of celebrating, I was facing a difficult family conversation, the outcome of which was impossible to predict. I stood on the porch for a long time, looking at the stars and thinking about life, how many trials I had to go through, how many problems I had to solve. But family conflicts were always the most painful. You can cope with drought, falling livestock prices, broken equipment, but when relationships with loved ones fall apart, it hurts right in the heart. Finally, I went into the house and went to bed. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I needed to face it with a clear head and a strong will. Whatever happened at the family dinner, I would do everything possible to restore peace to our family. Vivian was already asleep, breathing quietly beside me. I lay down carefully, trying not to wake her, but sleep did not come for a long time. Thoughts about tomorrow, possible scenarios for the conversation, the words I wanted to say to my children and grandson were spinning in my head. Finally, fatigue took its toll, and I fell into a restless sleep full of disturbing images and fragments of conversations. In the morning, I would celebrate a birthday and perhaps change the fate of the entire family. On September 21st, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. Birthdays are usually a joyful occasion, but today it felt more like preparing for battle. The sun was shining outside the window, birds were singing in the garden, everything looked peaceful and calm. But I knew that in the evening there would be a conversation that could finally destroy our family relationships. Vivian got up even earlier than me and was already bustling about in the kitchen. The smell of fresh baking filled the house. She was baking my favorite apple pie with cinnamon. On the table were the ingredients for a festive dinner: young beef, which she was going to roast with herbs, fresh vegetables from our garden, and potatoes that we had dug up last week. "Happy birthday, dear," she said, hugging me. "I wish you health and family happiness." "Thank you," I replied, kissing her on the cheek. I'm just afraid that family happiness is in serious doubt today. Don't think about it in the morning, Vivian asked. Today is your holiday. Maybe everything will turn out better than we expect. I wanted to share her optimism, but I couldn't shake my bad feelings. Too much had changed in recent weeks to hope for a simple reconciliation. In the morning, several friends and neighbors called with congratulations. Dr. Fitzpatrick wished me good health and promised to stop by next week with a gift. Thatcher called too, but I heard alarm in his voice. He clearly remembered the evening's conversation with the family. "How are you?" he asked. "Ready for the big talk?" "As ready as you can be," I replied. "We'll see how it goes." "Hang in there, old man. And remember, whatever happens, you're doing the right thing." The day dragged on slowly. I tried to go about my usual business, checked on the livestock, talked to Oswald about plans for the coming week, sorted through the mail. But my thoughts kept returning to the evening ahead. Oswald noticed my state of mind. "Mr. Hardwell, it's your birthday today, and you look like you're going to a funeral." "Maybe I am," I replied gloomily. "The funeral of family peace." He didn't ask for details, but he wished me luck and gave me a bottle of good whiskey that he had saved for the occasion. By evening, Vivian had set the table in the dining room. A white tablecloth, the best tableware, candles in silver candlesticks, everything as it should be for a family celebration. In the center of the table was a roast beef, accompanied by side dishes, salads, and fresh bread. Everything looked festive and appetizing. "Maybe good food will help create a peaceful atmosphere," said my wife, smoothing out the folds of the tablecloth. "I hope so," I replied, although I had my doubts. At exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, Colin's car pulled up to the house. I looked out the window and saw that all three of them had arrived. My son, daughter-in-law, and grandson. They got out of the car slowly, as if they were going to an unpleasant procedure. Colin was wearing a dark suit, Priscilla was wearing a formal dress, and Bentley had put on a clean shirt, but his jeans were still wrinkled. I went out to meet them on the porch, trying to smile as naturally as possible. "Welcome. I'm glad you were able to come. Happy birthday, Dad," Colin said, shaking my hand. His gaze was wary. Priscilla gave me a box of chocolates and kissed me on the cheek. "Congratulations, Clarence." "I wish you good health," Bentley muttered through clenched teeth. "Happy birthday, Grandpa." His tone was so cold that Vivian, who had come out to greet the guests, raised her eyebrows in surprise. We went into the house and sat down at the festive table. Vivian poured wine, a good red that we had been saving for special occasions. I made a short toast. "Thank you for coming. May this evening be filled with peace and understanding." We drank, but the atmosphere remained tense. Colin and Priscilla answered questions in monosyllables, and Bentley hardly participated in the conversation at all. He ate in silence, occasionally glancing at me strangely. "How's work?" I asked my son. "Same as usual." "Lots of paperwork." "And you, Priscilla?" "Same as usual. There are always a lot of insurance claims in the fall." The conversation wasn't flowing. Vivian tried to liven things up, asking about weekend plans and health, but she got the same terse answers. Finally, I decided it was time to get to the main issue. There was no point in pretending everything was fine. "Colin," I said, putting down my fork, "I heard that you took out a large loan from the bank last week." There was a silence. My son froze with a piece of meat on his fork, Priscilla turned pale, and Bentley looked up at me defiantly. "Who told you?" Colin asked after a pause. "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that it's true. $50,000 against Priscilla's house." Colin put down his fork and sighed. "Yes, it's true. So you've decided to go ahead with this establishment?" "A poker club," Bentley clarified. "Call it what it is." "Okay, a poker club," I agreed. "And you understand what you're getting into?" Colin sat up straight in his chair. "Dad, we're adults. We have the right to make our own decisions. Of course you do. But you don't have the right to risk the home your family lives in." "We're not risking it," Bentley interjected. "We're investing in a profitable business." "An illegal business," or I corrected him. "All businesses were illegal at one time," my grandson declared. "Then they were legalized." His audacity struck me. I looked at Colin. "And you share your son's opinion?" Colin paused, then replied, "Dad, you don't understand our situation. The salary at the bank is barely enough to live on. Priscilla doesn't earn much either, and expenses are growing every year. Then find another job, I suggested, or move to a bigger city where salaries are higher. Easy to say, Priscilla smiled bitterly. Who's going to buy our house? In a small town, real estate takes years to sell. But now you've mortgaged that house for a dubious venture, I pointed out. Not dubious, but profitable, Bentley insisted. We've calculated everything. In 6 months, we'll recoup our investment, and in a year, we'll double our capital. Vivian, who had been silent until then, couldn't take it anymore. Bentley, how can you be so sure of yourself? You're still a child. You don't understand anything about business. A child? Her grandson flared up. I'm 19 years old, and I understand more about modern life than all of you put together. Don't you dare talk to your grandmother like that, I said sharply. What did I say? The truth? Colin tried to calm the situation down. Bentley, behave yourself. We're guests here. Guests? The boy snorted. This is our family. Or it was a family until Grandpa decided to lecture us on morality. I felt anger boiling up inside me, but I tried to remain calm. Bentley, I'm not lecturing you. I'm just worried about you. Worried, my grandson sneered. Or do you just not want us to get rich and stop depending on you? Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood up from the table. What did you say? What I think, Bentley replied insolently. You like being the head of the family, giving advice, deciding who is worthy of help and who is not. And if we become independent, you will lose your power over us. Vivian threw up her hands. My God, Bentley! How can you say that? It's very simple, the boy replied. I'm telling the truth that you don't want to hear. Colin finally intervened. Bentley, that's enough. You're going too far. No, let him speak, I said in an icy tone. Let him say everything he thinks about his grandfather. Bentley stood up and looked me in the eye. You want to know what I think? I think you're an old stubborn man who lives in the past. The world has changed and you don't understand that. Your principles are 50 years out of date. Bentley, Priscilla exclaimed, but her grandson didn't stop. And you know what, Grandpa? Soon you'll be gone, and we'll all be much better off. These words rang out like a gunshot in the silence of the dining room. Vivian gasped and pressed her hand to her chest. Priscilla turned pale as chalk. Even Colin opened his mouth in surprise. I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not resentment, just a cold emptiness. The grandson I loved, bought toys for, taught to ride horses, had just wished me dead. Colin, I said quietly, will you stop your son? Demand an apology? There was a long pause. Colin looked up, looked at me, then at Bentley, then back at me, and said nothing. That silence spoke louder than any words. My son did not condemn his grandson's words. Perhaps he felt the same way, but did not dare to say so out loud. I see, I said. So you both feel that way. Dad, that's not true, Colin protested weakly. Bentley just got excited. I didn't get excited, my grandson snapped. I said what I've wanted to say for a long time. I walked over to Bentley and looked him in the eyes. There was no remorse or shame in them, only anger and a strange cruelty. All right, I said calmly. Let's see how much better you feel. Then I turned to Colin. Take your family and get out of my house. Dad, don't, Vivian pleaded through her tears. Maybe we can talk some more. No, I replied firmly. The conversation is over. Colin stood up from the table. Dad, we didn't want it to turn out this way. But it did, I said, and it's your choice. Bentley headed for the door, but turned around at the dining room threshold. Don't think we'll be lost without your help. We have our own plan, and we'll carry it out. We'll see, I replied coldly. They began to pack their things. Priscilla cried and apologized to Vivian, but it was too late. Colin tried to say something, but I didn't listen to him. Words couldn't change anything now. I walked them to the car and stood on the porch until they disappeared around the bend. Vivian was crying in the house. I could hear her sobs through the open window. When I returned to the dining room, I saw the uneaten holiday dinner, overturned glasses and napkins on the floor. It all looked like a battlefield after a battle. Vivian sat at the table and sobbed. What will happen now? What will happen to our family now? I hugged my wife and stroked her head. I don't know. But after what happened today, I'm not sure we have a family at all. We sat for a long time in the devastated dining room, holding hands and trying to comprehend what had happened. My 69th birthday had turned into a family disaster. My grandson wished me dead, and my son remained silent. It was worse than any quarrel or conflict. Maybe they'll come to their senses, Vivian whispered. Maybe they'll call tomorrow and ask for forgiveness. They won't call, I said. They've made their choice. Now let them live with the consequences. But deep down, I hoped I was wrong. That tomorrow or the day after, Colleen would call, apologize for her son and herself, and ask for another chance. That family is more important than money and ambition. However, the phone remained silent. And in that silence, I heard the final verdict on our relationship. As I cleared the remains of the holiday dinner from the table, I thought about how I now truly had no family. All I have is a wife who loves me and supports me in everything. My children and grandson have become strangers who see me as an obstacle to easy money. Fine, I said aloud as I stacked the plates. Let's see how much better off they are without me. Those words sounded like an oath, and I was going to keep it. After a terrible birthday, a day passed in painful silence. Vivian hardly spoke, only occasionally sobbing and shaking her head. I went about my usual household chores, but my thoughts kept returning to my grandson's words. Soon you'll be gone, and we'll all be much better off. That phrase played over and over in my head like a broken record. On the morning of September 23rd, I made a decision. Sitting in my office, staring at the phone, I realized that I couldn't just stand by and watch my family self-destruct. If Colin and Bentley were determined to ruin their lives, that was their choice. But I didn't have to stand by and watch them break the law in my hometown. I picked up the phone and dialed the City Hall number. The secretary connected me to Gerald Watson, who had been the mayor of Midtown for 12 years. We had known each other since we were young, having gone to school together, although our relationship could hardly be called a friendship. Hello, Clarence, the mayor greeted me. How are you? I heard it was your birthday yesterday. Congratulations. Thanks, Gerald. I'm calling about business. I need to talk to you confidentially. I'm listening. What is it? I took a deep breath. I've received information that an underground gambling establishment is planned to open in the city, a poker club in the old McDonald's warehouse. There was a pause. Where did you get this information? The mayor asked cautiously. From a reliable source? I can't give you any details, but the information is accurate. I see. What do you want from me? I want the police to keep an eye on that warehouse, to check it out when it starts operating. Another pause. Gerald was thinking about what he had heard. Clarence, I have a strange feeling that people you know personally are involved in this matter. The mayor had always been a perceptive man. I didn't deny it. Perhaps. But the law's the law. Of course. I'll pass the information on to Sheriff Thompson. He'll take the necessary measures. Thank you. Clarence, the mayor said before hanging up, I hope you understand what you're doing. I understand, I replied and hung up. It was hard. In fact, I was setting up my own son and grandson. But after yesterday's conversation, it became clear that they were no longer my family. And if they weren't family, then they were just citizens about to break the law. Vivian entered the office with a cup of coffee. Who were you talking to? The mayor. About what? She asked, although she probably guessed. About Colin and Bentley's poker club. My wife put the cup on the table and looked at me in horror. Clarence, what have you done? What I had to do, I replied firmly. They chose their path. Let them follow it to the end. But they're your son, your grandson. Who made it clear yesterday that they don't need me? What's more, they'll be better off without me. Vivian began to cry. Maybe it's not too late to fix things? Call the mayor and tell him you've changed your mind. It's too late, I said. Too much has changed. The next 2 days passed quietly. I waited for developments, wondering how quickly the police would respond to my information. Vivian was gloomy and hardly spoke. Oswald also noticed the change in our mood, but tactfully did not ask any questions. The answer came on the third day, September 25th, in the afternoon. I was sitting on the porch reading the newspaper when I heard the roar of an engine. Colin's car pulled up to the house at high speed. His son and grandson jumped out. Both were furious. You! Bentley shouted without even saying hello. You ratted us out! Colin looked no less enraged. Dad, how could you? I put down the newspaper and looked at them calmly. What are you talking about? Don't pretend, Bentley flared up. This morning the police raided the warehouse. They arrested 2 of our partners and confiscated the equipment. I see, I said. And what about you? We weren't there, Colin replied grimly. But now all the money is gone. $50,000. Vivian looked out of the house when she heard the shouting. Seeing the angry guests, she stepped back in fear. How could you betray your own family? Bentley continued to shout. You've ruined us. I didn't ruin anyone, I replied calmly. I just informed the authorities about a planned violation of the law. Colin took a step forward. Do you realize that we've lost our house now? We have to pay the mortgage, and we don't have the money. I understand, but it was your choice and your consequences. Bentley was beside himself with rage. We will never forgive you for this. Never. You don't have to, I replied. After what you said at the birthday party, we're even. My grandson suddenly rushed onto the porch and punched the table where my newspaper was lying. The table tipped over, and the newspaper scattered across the floor. Bentley, Colin shouted, stop! But the boy didn't listen. He grabbed a flower pot that was standing by the porch railing and threw it on the floor. The pot broke, and soil scattered across the boards. You think we'll just give up? He yelled. You're wrong! I got up from my chair. Get off my property. Now. And if we don't? Bentley asked defiantly. Instead of answering, I went into the house and took a hunting rifle from the wall. Returning to the porch, I cocked it, showing that it was loaded. This is what will happen if you don't leave, I said coldly. Colin grabbed his son by the arm. Bentley, let's go. Don't tempt fate, but his grandson broke free. No, he has to answer for what he did. Bentley rushed into the house. I tried to stop him, but he was faster and stronger. In the hallway, he knocked over a coat rack, and in the living room, he threw several books from the shelf onto the floor. Bentley, stop it, Colin shouted, but his son didn't listen. My grandson burst into the dining room and began smashing everything in sight. He knocked over chairs and swept the dishes Vivian had prepared for dinner off the table. The plates shattered with a loud clatter. Vivian stood in the corner and cried, Stop him! Stop him! I pointed my gun at Bentley. Enough! One more step and I'll shoot. My grandson stopped and looked at me with hatred. Shoot your own flesh and blood? You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, cocking the trigger. At that moment, Oswald and two other ranch workers entered the house. Hearing the noise and shouting, they came to help. Mr. Hardwell, what's going on? Oswald asked. Take them out, I ordered, pointing to Colin and Bentley, and make sure they don't come back. Oswald was a strong man, and the other two workers were no slouches either. The three of them easily overpowered Bentley, who tried to resist. Hands off, the guy shouted. I'll leave on my own. Then go, Oswald said, and don't come back here. Colin didn't resist. He walked silently, his head down. He stopped at the doorstep and turned around. Dad, I never thought it would come to this. I did, I replied. From the moment you decided to get involved in illegal business, we'll see each other again, Bentley promised as he was dragged onto the porch. I don't think so, I said. Oswald and the workers escorted them to the car and made sure they left. Then they returned to the house to help clean up the aftermath of the rampage. Mr. Hardwell, maybe we should call the police? Oswald suggested. Report the property damage? No need, I replied. They won't be back. We cleaned up the broken dishes, picked up the overturned furniture, and swept up the shards. Vivian helped silently, only occasionally sobbing. The material damage was minor. A few plates, a flower pot, some overturned chairs. But the emotional damage seemed irreparable. When the workers left, my wife and I were alone in the tidied-up house. Vivian sat in an armchair and cried quietly. What will happen now, she asked. What will happen to them? What will happen to us? I don't know, I answered honestly, but there's no turning back. That evening, Thatcher arrived. He had already heard in town about the police operation at McDonald's warehouse and guessed my role in what had happened. Tough day? He asked as he stepped onto the porch. Very, I replied. We sat down in chairs. Vivian brought tea but did not join the conversation. She went back into the house. Tell me, Thatcher said, lighting his pipe. I recounted the events of the last few days in detail, from the call to the mayor to today's rampage. Thatcher listened silently, nodding occasionally. So it's all over, he concluded when I finished my story. It looks that way. Do you regret your decision? I thought about it. Did I regret it? On the one hand, I had effectively destroyed the lives of my son and grandson. On the other hand, they had chosen this path themselves, and I had simply prevented them from seeing it through to the end. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. After what Bentley said at the birthday party, I realized that this was no longer my family. What about Colin? He didn't say anything when your son was insulting you. Silence is also a choice. He could have stopped Bentley, demanded an apology, but he remained silent. That means he agreed. Thatcher took a long drag on his pipe. You know, in my years as sheriff, I've seen a lot of family tragedies. Money really does change people, sometimes beyond recognition. It's not just about money, I objected. It's about principles, about what you're willing to do for profit and what you're not. You're right, and you did the right thing. Although you paid a high price, we sat on the porch until late at night, discussing what had happened. Thatcher said that rumors were already circulating in town about the Hardwell family conflict. Some people condemned me for being cruel to my relatives, while others praised me for my principles. What are people saying about Colin and Bentley? I asked. All sorts of things. Many believe that they are to blame for what happened. Planning an illegal business in a small town is not the smartest idea. What will happen to them now? Colin will lose his job at the bank. Management won't tolerate an employee involved in gambling. They'll probably have to sell the house to pay off the loan. The family is in for some tough times, I nodded. That was to be expected. Reputation in a small town is a fragile thing. One wrong move can destroy the results of years of hard work. What about Bentley? He's young. It's easier for him to start over. But his character has been ruined. If he doesn't change, he's in for big trouble ahead. We talked about the future, about how to move on. Thatcher advised me not to shut myself off, to keep in touch with friends and neighbors. Vivian is having a hard time coping with the family breakup and needs support. Maybe they'll come to their senses in time, Thatcher said before leaving. They'll realize their mistakes and ask for forgiveness. I don't think so, I replied. Too much has been said. Too much has been done. Some things cannot be forgotten. But what if they do ask for forgiveness? I thought about it. Would I forgive them? Would I be able to forget Bentley's words, Colin's silence, today's destruction? I don't know, I answered honestly. Forgiveness is one thing, but restoring trust is much more difficult. After Thatcher left, I sat alone on the porch for a long time. The night was quiet and cool, the stars shining brightly in the cloudless sky. Somewhere, cows mooed and tree leaves rustled. The familiar sounds were soothing, but they couldn't completely drown out the pain in my soul. Vivian came out onto the porch in her bathrobe. Are you going to bed? Soon, I replied. She sat down in the chair next to me. What are you thinking about? About family, about what was left of it. I'm still here, my wife said quietly, and I'll always be with you. I took her hand. I know, and that's what matters most. We sat in silence, holding hands and looking at the stars. In 45 years of marriage, we had been through a lot. Joys and sorrows, successes and failures. But the family breakup was the hardest test. Clarence, Vivian said, what if they really do ask for forgiveness? Then we'll talk, I replied. But they have to admit their mistakes. Not just ask for forgiveness, but understand that they did wrong. What if they don't understand? Then we'll move on without them. We have friends. We have the work I've dedicated my life to. That's enough. But deep down, I hoped that someday the family would reunite, that Colleen and Bentley would realize their mistakes and come back. As long as that hope lives, there is still a chance for reconciliation. However, days, weeks, and months passed. The phone remained silent. Colin and his family seemed to have vanished into thin air. Sometimes I heard bits and pieces of news, that they had sold the house, that Colin had left to look for work in another city, but there was no direct contact. And gradually I began to understand that the family had truly broken up for good, that my choice between the law and blood ties had destroyed what had been built over decades. Was I right? Time will tell. But there was no turning back. In the end, I stated 3 simple truths. First, you cannot change the past, but you can change the future. Second, everyone has the right to their own boundaries. Third, a person's strength is manifested in the ability not only to forgive, but also to make decisions for themselves. And now I want to ask you, would you forgive or would you draw a line under it? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening to us from.